Tracy, is the closed captioning working on YouTube?
I don't, oh, let's see. Yes, it seems to be.
Working on YouTube? Oops, echo. Well, was that a yes or a no, Tracy?
Yes, yes, the option is there.
Oops. Okay, I think we can get started. Commissioner Aguinaldo, we are all ready to go. Whenever you are. You're on mute.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Aloha, good morning, everyone. The online meeting for the Windward Planning Commission will come to order. It is Thursday, May 6, 2021. The time is 9:07 a.m. Based on the governor's proclamation related to the COVID-19 emergency, we are holding this meeting online. This is to maintain physical distancing to prevent. The public can observe this meeting on YouTube, live streaming by following the link provided on the county website or by using the URL advertised on the agenda. The video recording will be accessible on the same YouTube channel for those who are not able to watch it live. The background reports and the agenda items, which include the application and the planning director's recommendation reports, are available on the county website. The minutes and transcripts will also be posted on the county website at a later date. With respect to public testimony, a written testimony in opposition was received from Alexander Tambler, and there is one testifier registered to provide oral testimony for today's meeting. I would like to remind all the participants the protocol at this online meeting: silence your phone. Only one person may speak at a time. Raise your hand to be recognized by the chair. Before you speak directly into the microphone and keep your microphone muted while you are not speaking. If you talk over each other or if your microphone picks up noise, that will make the speaker's testament inaudible and it cannot be transcribed. Thank you for your cooperation. Introducing our commissioners. With that, I would like to introduce my fellow commissioners who are present at this time. When you are called, please raise your hand and test your audio by saying good morning or present. Commissioner Dean Au.
Good morning, everybody.
Commissioner Joe Clarkson.
Good morning.
Commissioner Dennis Lin.
Good morning.
Commissioner Tom Rafferty.
Morning.
Commissioner Michelle Galimba.
Good morning.
Our chairperson, Joe Ruplogo, will be attending this meeting on a later time. We do have, and I am Vice Chair Gilbert Aguinaldo. We do have the quorum required to hold this meeting. Introducing of staff, the following staff are also in attendance. Deputy Corporation Counsel Malia Hall,
Good morning.
Attorney for the Commission, Planning Director, Attorney for the Commission, Planning Director Zendo Kern,
Morning, everybody.
Deputy Corporation Counsel Jean Campbell,
Good morning.
Attorney for the Planning Director, Planner Tracy Lee Camaro,
Good morning.
and Commission Secretary Melissa Dacayan Salvador. And assisting the commission and staff temporarily, assignment planning program manager Maya Jackson, who is hosting this virtual meeting. With that, let us proceed to our business on the agenda. Statement from public. We have one testifier registered to give an oral testimony, which is Lisa Franklin. Lisa, are you present?
Yes, hello. Hi, everybody.
Aloha, aloha and good morning.
Thank you.
So Lisa, prior to starting, please raise your right hand. Let me see where you're at. Where is Lisa? Oh, I see you, Lisa. Good morning.
Hi.
Hi, please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm to tell the truth on this matter before the Windward Planning Commission?
Yes, definitely.
Please state your name and the town where you reside.
My name is Lisa Franklin, and I reside in Hilo Town.
Awesome. Commissioners, any question for the testifier? Oh, sorry. After testimony. Okay, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. I'm a resident and homeowner of Mililani Street. I am in opposition to parts of this project, so I'm here to speak. My primary concern is the proposed drive-through restaurant to be situated at the corner of Mililani and Kekuanoa Street as part of the proposed office complex and grocery store situation. I'm giving testimony in opposition. So I'm curious if anyone has ever been to a drive-through before. I certainly have. I went to Taco Bell recently after never having fast food for like 20 years. But my real question is, would anyone want a drive-through across from their home and their bedroom window where they sleep at night? A drive-through, in my opinion, does not belong in a residential area. They have a reputation of being really loud and disturbing for several reasons. There's noise for the yelling of orders over the loudspeaker. There's idling cars that wait in continuous turnover of traffic. The hours are often open much longer than regular businesses and restaurants. They create traffic congestion all over this town, even at like Long's Drug, which isn't even a food center, will pour out into the road. The land on which this drive-through is proposed is a resort hotel land, and it borders family residential areas, including my own home. And it's planned to have a minimum setback from the road. I really doubt that a drive-through was in the original intention for this part of Hilo Town. This is Waikea House Lots. It borders a recreational facility at Wailoa Park. Many of the people on this street have lived on this street their entire lives. Several of the homes have never changed hands, and they're elders that live here, which is why no one's at this meeting today. Because we connect to Wailoa Park, this road has a lot of family members that will jog, walk dogs, ride bikes. So I have concern that we might need to consider if there's going to be like a sidewalk or something. There's a gentleman who's jogged on this road for like almost every day for the past 20 years. There's another gentleman who pushes his boat to the water to fish every day. And he might have done that since he was a teenager because he's grown up in that house his whole life. He's in his 50s or 60s. I just feel that this project, with especially the drive-through, will affect the quality of life for the people that live here. The people that work at the store, the people that build these buildings, they go home at night. We will still be here. So I share concern for the increase in traffic. I know that that's not a concern of yours and it doesn't need to be met to have your project, but Kekuanaoa is very busy. The intersection of Mililani Street and Kekuanaoa clogs. When people make left turns, the traffic backs up Kekuanaoa. When there's a red light at Monono Street, it will back up to BEI. I think it's called Iolani Street. It happens. The big issue there is going to be that if everyone's making a left turn on Mililani from Mauka side, and especially even those that are coming from Puna side, they might just take the right turn onto Mililani. That intersection is going to get a ton of traffic. It's going to happen. You have 240 spaces or whatever parking spots, and you're going to have a fast turnover, especially if there's a drive-through. It's just not a good place for a drive-through. Okay, another point to mention is that that intersection regularly floods. The county has put temporary signage there. It's been there for several years. The water will fill. People will have to slow down when they come down the hill and the water will splash, or they'll drive around it crossing the yellow lines. Again, not your problem, but with the increase of traffic that your project would have, that needs to be addressed with the county. It's not a safe intersection. Just creates a ton of congestion. So I just highly doubt any of you are going to want to go to sleep at night with a drive-through across from your home. It's just something for me to voice. I have to voice my opinion. So I urge you to just, consider this, disapprove of that part of the project, and just kind of consider the implications that this will have on the residents that live nearby. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm
Thank you very much, Lisa, for your testimony.
Yep, I appreciate all the work you do.
All right, mahalo.
Thanks.
Commissioners, any questions for the testifier?
Vice Chair, this is Commissioner Ao. I do have a question.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Franklin.
Hi, Dean.
Hi, I have two questions for you. I guess the first question is, where do you live in respect to the project?
My assumption is that I live literally across from where the drive-through was proposed. I'm at 733. Oh, I didn't really want to say that on YouTube. I live next to the labor union building. Like the second home on the road.
Okay, yeah, because I'm looking at the map. And so you're right across the street from the proposed property, right? Is that correct?
100%.
Okay, second question I have for you is the applicant applied for their permit, their SMA permit on January 14th, beginning of this year, which is like what, 4 months ago, 3 months ago. I'm just curious, has the developer reached out to you or anybody that you know of in the community?
I have received 2 letters that this was happening. I did also attend a meeting before when the original arsenic was going to be removed from the soil. I did attend that meeting as well. And at that time, I think the proposal involved housing, like student housing for the neighborhood, in addition to Island Naturals and an apartment complex, but I could be wrong. That was perhaps 2 years ago.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your answers.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions for our testifier?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to thank Lisa for testifying.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other commissioners? Going once, going twice? Okay, Lisa, thank you very much for your testimony. You may please log out now of the Zoom platform and watch the YouTube live stream video if you are interested. Commissioners, may I hear a motion to close the public testimony?
Mr. Chair,
Go right ahead.
are we going to do the presentation by staff?
Oh, yes. We need to do the presentation at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can close public testimony though, Gilbert.
Okay. At this time, we close public testimony.
I mean, with the motion, sorry.
Oh, with the motion.
Yeah.
Okay. At this time, we are here to close public testimonies. Commissioners, may I hear a motion to close the public testimony?
Move that, this is Commissioner Clarkson. I move that public testimony be closed.
Second.
Public testimony. It's been moved by Commissioner Clarkson and second by Commissioner Rafferty to close the public hearing. Discussion. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion to close the public hearing carries. Okay. New business, presentation of agenda item number 1. Applicant Island Naturals Property LLC. Application for the Special Management Area, SMA, use permit to allow the construction of approximately 67,685 square foot retail and office complex on approximately 4.045 acres of land situated in a special management area. The subject property is located on the northwestern corner of the intersection of Mililani Street and Kekunaoa Avenue, portion of Waikia Salkilo District, Hawaii, TMK, parentheses 3, 2-2-030-017. Staff, you may proceed with the presentation.
Thank you. Please allow me to share my screen. Can you all see my screen? You can give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Good morning, members of the Windward Planning Commission. The application you have before you today is for Island Naturals Properties LLC. They're requesting a special management area use permit to develop a retail and office complex on approximately 4.045 acres of land situated within the special management area. The subject property is located in the northwest corner of the intersection of Kekuanaoa Avenue and Mililani Street in Hilo. Just to orient the commissioners, the photo to the left of your screen is a wide view of the area that the subject property is located in. And the photo located to the bottom right is a zoomed in photo that shows the area that the subject property is also located in. Waikia Pond is in the blue area on the bottom of your slide, and Kilauea Avenue is running from the north to southbound direction on the left-hand portion of your slide. And you can see Kekuanaoa Avenue runs east and west along the bottom of the property. The subject property is also outlined in black. The applicant's request. The applicant is proposing to develop a 67,685 square foot retail and office complex within 3 detached structures. If phased, the project would be developed in the 3 phases that would consist of, the first phase would consist of a 41,657 square foot 2-story structure that would include the Island Naturals store on the first level and an office space on the second level. The second phase would include a 2,966 square foot freestanding drive-through restaurant near the Mililani Street / Kekuanaoa Avenue intersection. And the third and last final phase will include a 23,072 square foot 2-story structure consisting of a retail space on the first level and an office space on the second level. The intent is that the applicant would like to develop a one-stop commercial retail and office center, with its store being one of the major anchors. The total number of parking that is going to be put on the subject property will be 226 stalls, 8 of which will be ADA, and there will be approximately 6 loading zones. The phasings will also be based on construction and timing. So the applicant is also proposing that they may, instead of doing phasing, they may in fact do it all at one time, or if something comes up, they will stick to the 3 phases that they have proposed. On your screen, you can see the current zoning map for the county, which you can see the subject property that's outlined in red on your screen, and it's currently zoned General Commercial CG-7.5, indicated by the salmon color, and Resort Hotel, which is the V-0.75 that is indicated in the fuchsia color. Properties to the east of the subject property are zoned single family residential, as shown to you in the yellow color, as well as neighborhood commercial, CN 7.5, which is shown to you in the light pink. The surrounding properties to the south and across the street from the subject property from Kekuano'a Avenue include property zone double family residential, the RD-3.75, shown in the light brown, and the limited industrial ML-20 shown to you in the gray. The state land use designation for the subject property is urban, as indicated by the pink. Also, the surrounding areas and properties around the area are also designated as urban. The general plan allocation guide map, also known as the loop tag, designates the subject property, which is outlined in white on your screen, as high density urban, and it's indicated by the red color. The high density urban designation allows for the general commercial, multiple family residential, and other related services. Properties across the street of the subject property are designated as medium density urban, as indicated by the orange color. This is the site plan that was submitted to the department by the applicant. As you can see, and I'm going to try and put a pointer on here, a laser pointer that helps. So as you can see, this is the 41,657 square foot 2-story structure that the applicant is proposing, which will house the Island Natural store on the first level and an office space on the second level, which is shown with this outline. Then you have the 2,966 square foot freestanding drive-through restaurant, which is near the Mililani Street and Kekuano'a Avenue intersection. And then last will be the 23,072 square foot 2-story structure that is being proposed to have retail space on the first level and office space on the second level. Also to point out for this site plan, you have Kekuano'a Avenue, which runs on the bottom of your screen. You have the 2 right in, right out only entrances that are being proposed off of Kekuano'a Avenue. You have Mililani Street, which runs from top to bottom on your screen. There is also a 20-foot future road widening off of Mililani Street. And you can see that they have the full access movement from the Mililani Street, as well as the Hualani Street intersection with Kekuano'a Avenue, where you can see they're proposing a full movement access as well from this easement into the property. So this slide shows the access to the subject property from Kekuano'a Street. The photo to the left of the intersection, to the left is the intersection of the Kekuano'a Avenue and Hualani Street intersection. This intersection currently serves as the entrance to the County of Hawaii Department of Water Supply building, Waikea Villas, and also a bank. The photo to the right is a photo of the approximate location of the Hualani Street easement access to the proposed office and retail complex that we're discussing right now. This slide is to orient you all on the access to the subject property from the Hualani Street easement. To the left, I've included the site plan again with an arrow to direct you all in the approximate location of the easement access to the subject property via Hualani Street, and to show you the direction in which the photo to the right was taken. And as you can see the photo on the right, you have the Waikea Villas located on the left and the associated parking for the bank, which is located to the right. This slide shows the property's Kekuano'a Avenue street frontage. The photo to the left is the approximate area on Kekuano'a Avenue that the applicant has proposed one of the right in and right out only access points to the subject property. The photo on the right is a view of the property's Kekuano'a Avenue street frontage facing east and heading in the direction of Kaneo'elehua Avenue and Hilo Airport. It should be noted that Kekuano'a Avenue is a 2-lane paved roadway with paved shoulders. This photo is the view of Mililani Street facing south towards, the photo to the left is the view of Mililani Street facing south towards the intersection with Kekuano'a Avenue. The subject property is located to the right of this photo. The photo on your right screen is a view of the intersection of Kekuano'a Avenue facing west and heading in the direction of Kilauea Avenue. The subject property again is located to the right of your screen, excuse me, and you can see that there is vegetation that is overgrown on the property over the years. The photo to the left on your screen is a view facing the subject property off of Mililani Street. This photo is an approximate location of where the full movement access is being proposed into the subject property. The photo on your right is a view of the subject property off of Mililani Street again, where you can see how the current status of the parcel does have the overgrown vegetation. Again, Mililani Street is a 2-lane paved road with mostly grass shoulders, and there's also a 20-foot future roadway widening strip that is located along the property's Mililani Street frontage. This is an aerial photograph of the site. The subject property is outlined in red. There is currently no structure located on the site, and the land is currently vacant. You can see the surrounding area contains various mixed uses that contains residences and commercial uses, as well as the Waikea Villas area and some industrial uses within the area as well. Kekuano'a Avenue is located on the bottom of the property and on your screen, and Mililani Street is headed in from the top to bottom direction on your screen. Both streets, again, are owned and maintained by the County of Hawaii. The planning director is recommending approval of the applicant's request with the conditions as requested in our recommendation report. Please note that after the commission received the background and recommendation report, testimony did come in from a concerned neighbor. This testimony was forwarded to the applicant and commissioners for review prior to this. In addressing one of the comments that was made as far as the drive-through restaurant, the restaurant is a permitted use within the CG zone district and resort district. The hope is that the 20-foot widening plus the 20-foot setbacks off of the front of the property should alleviate some of the concerns that the neighbor does have. We can discuss it further with some of the commissioners. And that concludes my presentation, and I can open the floor to questions.
Commissioners, any question for staff at this time?
I have a question, Vice Chair.
You may proceed.
Concerning the intersection of Mililani and Kekuanao'a, where the proposed drive-through restaurant is to be located, I could see from the aerial photograph some kind of industrial facility on the south side, but what's on the east side, on the northeast corner of that intersection? What kind of structure and business, if it is a business, is that?
It's my understanding that that might be a union business or some sort of small business in that sense. I know the structure itself looks like a dwelling, But I can research that right now for you.
Because we've had two testimonies related to the impacts of that drive-through, but I mean, just on my first impression, it's looking like immediately adjacent to the drive-through path is a very busy intersection, bracketed on both sides by non-residential structures. Can you bring up the map again and point out Ms. Franklin's residence? Just so I know where that is.
Yes, I can. So I looked it up, and it is, according to the real property tax records, it's the Laborers International Union that's located there. I know Ms. Franklin did mention that she didn't want to directly express where she lives on YouTube. So is that okay that I don't express where she directly lives? I mean, I know she mentioned that she lives off of Mililani Street, and I'll show you the screen, the zoning screen again. Which, can you guys see my screen right now? Okay, so I'll put on the red laser for you. So this is what the Laborers International Union's location is on the CN 0.75 property. And based off of the testimony that Ms. Franklin gave, she does live somewhere along the Mililani Street frontage. But like I said, I don't know if she wants to directly state where she lives on YouTube.
I got the, I mean, I don't think I'm revealing anything. I think it's approximately where the RS is visible on the map, but can anybody tell me how far that is distance-wise from the northwest corner of the intersection? I don't know what those lot dimensions are.
Let me pull the lot dimensions up real quick. So I have the corner lot, which is the one shown on your screen as being designated as a CN-7.5. I have it as a 90-foot off of Mililani Street and an 80-foot off of Kekuano'a Avenue. And then right next door to it, there's an approximate 100 feet by 200 feet.
Thank you, thank you. So those are 100-foot lot frontages, and then it looks like they switch down to 50 up by the other entrance. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for our staff, Tracy?
Yes, Chair. This is Commissioner Ao. I have a question.
You may proceed, Mr. Ao.
Okay, thank you, Tracy, for the presentation. I'm always impressed with staff presentation. And with this virtual, it's so much better than being in person with the presentation. Thank you very much. Can you bring up the, well, I'm looking at the proposed site plan. And you made mention that that doesn't reflect the additional 20-foot setback. Can you explain that? You said that it would it's going to be farther, or I don't know. You're saying something about we can discuss that about the setback. Is the current site plan with that 20-foot setback?
Yes, I apologize. I hope I didn't say that it doesn't reflect the 20-foot setback. It does. The site plan does reflect the 20-foot setback as well as the 20-foot future road widening, which is within that area that the drive-through restaurant is proposed to be located. And I understand that the testimony that came in has concerns in regards to the drive-through restaurant being in that area. The drive-through restaurant is a permitted use, and I can pull it up on my screen once again if that is what you guys would like to review.
Please. I also asked which way the traffic direction is proposed for the drive-through.
Okay. Okay, so the drive-through is located on the bottom portion of the right-hand side of your screen. The direction in which the drive-through is accessed, it looks to be coming in from, let me get the pointer for you.
I see the arrow.
Yes. So then you can see the 20-foot front yard setback as well as the 20-foot future road widening setback that the applicant is proposing as well.
I have a question.
You may proceed, Tom.
Let's see. On that site, on this drawing over here, do you have, is there any barrier between that drive-through and the road? Is there any barrier there, or is it going to be just simply just the curbing and the road on the other side of the curbing? Is there anything proposed barrier, some kind of sound barrier or physical barrier between the road and?
Commissioner Ratapi, this is Maya Jackson, if I could answer that. Sorry, Tracy. This plan does not reflect landscaping, but our county landscaping rule requires some landscaping or some type of fencing or barrier. It can be a berm, like a dirt berm, to create separation between the edge of the property line and a drive-through.
Okay, thank you. The testifier mentioned about the ponding, the flooding in that area. I'm just wondering what kind of flooding impact will these whole pavement area, these areas will be all paved, it's going to contribute to this area here, because he's right, it is indeed a flood area. It really flooded really bad around this area.
So when we received DPW engineering's comments, they did mention that the flood zone is X in this area. One of the requirements that they will have to do prior to getting plan approval after this process is they will need to do their drainage study. And that is one of the requirements based on code that they will need to complete for the area.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, the requirement will be that any additional water generated on site will have to be disposed of on site and cannot venture onto an adjoining property or a roadway.
Tracy, I have another question. So the proposed site plan just shows one entrance off of the main road. And is it correct that there will not be any egress or outgoing traffic on Mililani Street?
So there's going to be one full movement entrance off of Mililani Street, which will allow left in, left out, right in, right out. Off of Kekuanaoa Street, the applicant is proposing 2 right ins and 2 right outs off of Kekuanaoa Street. And then the Hualani Street entrance will have the one full access movement as well, similar to Mililani Street, where you will have a left in, left out, right in, right out.
Could you show that on the site plan, please?
Yes. So this is the site plan, and I'll get my red laser. So this is the Mililani Street entrance that they're proposing the full movement out of. Then you come down Mililani Street to Kekuanaoa Avenue, where you have a right in and a right out, the first right in and right out. And then you have the second right in and right out. Then the Hualani Street entrance will be another full movement access that will allow anyone going into the area a right in, a right out, as well as a left in and a left out. We consider those to be full movement.
I have a question, and it's a process question. Will the applicant be coming back to the Planning Commission for a plan approval, or is this the only time that they'll be coming to the commission?
So this is the only time that they will be coming to the commission. Because of the current zoning, actually, if this property wasn't located in the SMA, they would just be coming in for a plan approval, which is an administrative function that gets handled in-house. However, because it is located within the SMA and it is a fairly large development, they are required to come before the Planning Commission with this major application.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Tracy. And as far as the SMA site plan, and this is for Maya as well. This is prelim plans for us to review. And, if Tracy, if you can go back, onto the site plan, SB-1, the bottom closest in and out to Mililani off of Kekuanaoa.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Aguinaldo, you were breaking up.
Now, in that area, okay, I'm sorry.
No.
So as far as this plans here, this is,
sorry. Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So on site plan SB-1, there's the bottom entrance, right turn in, right turn out, right? Of Kekuanaoa to Mililani. Now, as far as that there, what is the requirement of in and outs for this size of property, where one that is further northeast, right, in and out, and we have one by the credit union, by County Department of Water Supply, in and out. Then we have the upper, and now directly southeast, we have a entrance go in and out. Yes. So I think that one there goes directly across the street. There's also a stop sign, so-called. There's another street there, But now, because we have a concern, and I know we are able to, it's not say able to, but it's okay to have a drive-through in this property, is always your surrounding neighbors. Is it possible to the orientation of the drive-through face to Kekuanaoa and close off that entrance right there? It's just something that I just wanted to just share. But of course, they may lose some parking stalls. I don't know if they gain or lose.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order. Can we talk to the applicant first, and then we're kind of going into discussion.
Oh, okay.
We can, let's talk to the applicant first.
Right.
And from there, we can see where they're at to address your question. Is that
agree.
Okay, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I yield at this time. Any other questions for staff? If there's no any other question for staff at this time, then we may proceed with the applicant's presentation.
I do have one more question.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Clarkson.
This situation kind of reminds me of an application we had some time ago. I think it was a bank, and there was going to be a drive-through teller, and we put a condition for a sound attenuating concrete or rock wall between the drive-through area and the residents adjacent. I forget what the height was. Will we have to make that, if this SMA permit is approved, will we have to make those kinds of conditions prior to that approval, or can that be negotiated between will we get another chance to review whatever the final plan is before that's approved? Maybe this is for Malia rather than staff.
Commissioner Clarkson, if I could answer that question. So this is a little bit different than the Bank of Hawaii application that you reviewed. The Bank of Hawaii application was a change of zone request, and it was not in the SMA. This property is located in the SMA, which is the only reason that they're coming in for an SMA permit. The SMA is like an overlay zone, and the criteria for granting an SMA permit is focused on the project's impacts to coastal resources. SMA permits are not, a criteria of the SMA is not whether the project will generate traffic. That's more of a zoning consideration, but this property already has its resort zoning. So any condition that the commission would want to place on this application or permit would need to address impacts related to the coastal zone area. For example, if the commission felt like the traffic would impede evacuation during a tsunami, that's a direct nexus or connection to impacts in the SMA. But aside from that, SMA permits do not have a criteria that addresses traffic. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Clarkson?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the commission certainly, by your definition, has exceeded its authority with Pi'ilani Partners. I mean, you're telling me that we vote up or down based on this preliminary application and are not allowed to consider anything that would relate to mitigating impacts on the adjacent community, the aspects that would be needed to mitigate impacts on the coastal zone?
Yes, so I believe the difference with Pi'ilani Partners was you were also reviewing a rezone amendment as well as an SMA permit. So the rezone amendment had criteria that addressed traffic and whether there was adequate infrastructure. For this permit for Island Naturals, the underlying zoning is existing. So if there are, concerns about inadequate infrastructure, the underlying zoning has been there for decades, and that's a function of zoning. It's not something that can be fixed through an SMA permit.
Well, I'm just wondering why staff didn't concentrate only on those few things, maybe the underground injection wells, the perimeter next to the closest to the Waikea fish ponds.
Sorry, are you talking about this application, Commissioner? Or are you?
I am. I'm talking about this application. Here we've gone through all these questions about the impacts on traffic, on neighbors, and now Maya's telling us that these are completely irrelevant to our approval or disapproval of this application. So I'm just a little bit confused about why we're even talking about them.
Commissioner Clarkson, I don't think I was saying it's irrelevant. I think I was saying if the commission wants to place conditions on the permit related to traffic, there has to be a nexus or connection to how traffic will impact the coastal resources, because this permit criteria looks at impacts to coastal resources and coastal hazards.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration.
Okay. Any other questions for staff commissioners?
I do have one actual question that relates to the coastal zone. There's going to be a
You may
large,
proceed.
I'm sorry, I should have asked permission. There's going to be a large parking lot, and all on-site stormwater has to be disposed of on-site, from what I understand Director Kern said recently. What provision, if any, is going to be made to keep effluent from the vehicles, crankcase oil, gasoline drips from uncombusted gasoline, diesel, out of those injection wells and out of the aquifer that's right next to the coast there?
We can have the applicant answer that question, Commissioner Clarkson.
Okay, I'll wait for.
Okay. Any other questions from our commissioners to staff? If there is none, we may proceed to the applicant's presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Acting Chairman. I noticed that the chair just walked in. I guess he's not participating, Chair Replogo. Anyway, by way of introduction, my name is Sidney Fouque. I'm a planning consultant. I've heard all
wait, that's it.
Yeah.
I have to read this if you don't mind.
Sure.
May you please, this is for applicant presentation. Mr. Fouque, Mr. If I can have you guys, Goldbowl and Mr. Rodeman. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth on this matter now before the Windward Planning Commission?
I do.
Please state your name. Please state your name and the town where you reside. Also, did you receive the planning department's background report and recommendation?
Okay, I'll start all over again then. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Sidney Fouquet. I've been retained by the applicant to serve as their agent on this application. I reside in Hilo. I've had a chance to discuss the staff's excellent background report and recommendation with the owner applicant, and they fully concur with both reports. I would like to also acknowledge, the presence of Mr. Russell Rudderman, the founder president of Island Natural, the applicant, and its CEO, Rahul Godbole, who are also available. Both of them are available for questions after the presentation and subsequent questions that the commissioners may have of me or of them.
Thank you.
So can I start now then?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
you may.
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You may proceed.
Okay. I think that your staff, Ms. Jackson's point is really like on point. Regarding the SMA question, that the site is already zoned. So my understanding is the review process and the decision-making process is directly related to the SMA guidelines. And so as a result, conditions have to be, tailored specifically to address the SMA guidelines. Ironically, I was involved in Piilani Partners and I was involved in the Bank of Hawaii rezoning. So I don't know why I get all of this before the Planning Commission. Maybe it's just fate or whatever. But nonetheless, I think as it relates to Piilani Partners, specifically addressing Commissioner Clarkson's question, I think the issue over there had more to do with the cultural resources, and cultural resources is one element that's very germane to for the SMA criteria as well. I don't think that cultural resources question is present over here. You raise a very good question relative to the the groundwater in that area, and how the excess water that's going to be generated by the project is going to be contained on site. As the staff had indicated, obviously it's going to be through a system of dry wells. Now, when you go through the dry well process, you have to secure the underground injection control permit, which is issued by the state Department of Health. And that specifically, that permitting process specifically looks at whether your system is going to compromise the groundwater and or other underground situation there. So there is that kind of administrative review process without having to go through this SMA process already in place. The other thing I kind of wanted to mention, which, it's pointed out in the staff's written report, but the staff didn't kind of point out, was that this property, as probably all of you old timers, or if you know, was the former KNEC processing plant. And I'm sure Mr. Repolgo, being in the sugar industry, understands that question very well. I mean, the function of that. And then the KNEC was essentially, like they used the bagasse, and then the bagasse was then converted into KNEC, which is like a form for like sealing or like a drywall situation. But in the process of making that the bagasse, what they had to do was they have to treat it with inorganic arsenic, so that it can kill all of the termites. And so that's what happened. And so when the KNEC plant terminated about 1963, 65, thereabouts, then what you had was a lot of residual, the property had a lot of residual arsenic contamination. So for the longest time, in spite of the property being zoned for resort uses, you had a lot of people looking at the site, and it's an excellent location for commercial activity, but there were no takers. And largely because of the question of like, how do you deal with the arsenic contamination? Luckily, luckily, I think, for the community, you had like the applicant, Mr. Rudderman, said that, I'll take it on, and he spent like about over the last 2 or 3 years, nearly $1 million to prepare the appropriate plans and have the total site remediated. And so now Department of Health finally certified, back in September of 2020 to say, yes, you can proceed with the project. One of the conditions that the state had imposed was that you can proceed to develop the property for commercial, industrial activities, but no residential uses. So, maybe like I understand, like, one of the testifiers mentioned about like maybe participating in a hearing and, seeing, there were representations that you could use the property for residential. No, you cannot. It has to be used, according to the Department of Health, it's limited to commercial and industrial activity. The reason why, like Mr. Rudderman, it's not like, he's doing this out of the kindness of his heart for the general community, which is really great. But over and beyond that, like the current operation right now at the Hilo Shopping Center is a little bit too small. It's not an efficient situation, especially since they went into the deli operation. So that's why they decided to kind of do the remediation on the property on this site here, and then do the whole project. Now, obviously the site is too big just for Island Natural, but all of this is going to be their flagship store. So that's why they came up with this kind of concept of having additional commercial and office related use. There is this kind of symbiotic relationship between, Island Natural and other kind of commercial retail activities. And they like their operation, is where it's currently located at the Hilo Shopping Center. And that's kind of like essentially what they want to duplicate, having that kind of other symbiotic land uses as well. Now, we have had, like, as in your background report kind of pointed out, like all of the cooperating agencies, whether it's police, fire, water, they didn't raise any objections. I was not alerted to any objection from the surrounding property owners. I sent notices, and in that notice, I provided explicit information in terms of if there were any concerns, you could contact me, you could contact the planning department, not only by phone, but also via email. But I did not receive anything until 2 days ago from the staff. And I guess like for this morning on the comments. Now, with respect to, their comments, specifically about, it was directed purely at the drive-through. I kind of want to point out, like, the drive-through situation over here is like, it's not like the other drive-through where you have the queuing or the stacking up of the vehicles on the public roadway. And you can look at, right here in downtown Hilo, you can see it at the Starbucks, along Kilauea Avenue. You can see the McDonald's on Kinoole Street. You see the Burger King at Hualalai. You do have the queuing effect over there. And the reason why is that, like the backup is directly into the streets. Now, on the other hand, you look at other fast food where you have like this kind of drive-through. You look at like the Puanaco Town Center. You have the McDonald's there, you have the Taco Bell, but they're all within the commercial area. So you don't have the queuing or the traffic impact spilling over to the street. You look at the KTA Puanaco area, you have the Jack in the Box. And where is that? It's also within the shopping complex. You go to Waimea, you see the McDonald's. The McDonald's is within it. So there is this kind of differences between like a standalone type of, drive-through, like a Starbucks on Kilauea versus like a McDonald's within the Puanaco Town Center, or like the KTA in Waimea. So it's an internalized kind of situation. I do understand the concern raised by some of the community members about, the noise, the associated with the, like the call box or whatever. I was involved in this one situation when they, Panda Express. We all know Panda Express downtown Hilo. Well, it's right next to the Hompa Honganji. And so the Honganji, members of the Honganji had raised questions to the planning department, and in turn, the members had also contacted the architect to see how they can address not only the noise issue coming from, I want to have this, and this, and as well as the possible smell. So during this process, there were quite a bit of like adjustments made by the Panda Express architect to specifically address the concerns raised by members of the church. And this was all done not during the SMA process, but it was done administratively during the plan approval process. So what I'm suggesting here is that, you know, hopefully if the Planning Commission can get over this, you know, these issues, provided by the staff's favorable recommendation and the condition, then some of these issues can specifically be worked out administratively during the plan approval process. I think Maya or Jason may have mentioned that during the plan approval process, there is a requirement to come up with this very specific site drainage plan as a condition of the plan approval application. The other thing to be mindful of is during that process too, the Department of Public Works will have to weigh in terms of the spacing of your driveways, you know, like from the Mililani Street intersection, and whether it also compromises the existing driveway that leads into the Department of Water Supply area. I'd like to also kind of point out that, you know, on condition number 7 that the staff is recommending, it specifically states that the landscaping shall be provided that addresses or mitigates adverse noise or visual impacts to adjoining properties. And so like during the plan approval process, they would have to, the applicant would have to provide plans to show how your landscaping can, if anything, mitigate, you know, these kind of noise and visual impact. And, you know, like if one final comment on the plan approval, I mean, like the project shows, you know, the concept project currently shows that the drive-through is scheduled like right at the corner. Now, during the plan approval process, if the planning director determines that that's not the best location given concerns, then they may have to relocate the drive-through maybe further down along Mililani Street, for example. You know, so that's the authority that's currently conferred upon the planning director, and I'm sure that the staff and the director will be very mindful of the concerns raised by the neighbors and take that into consideration during the plan approval process. I'm done.
Well said. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
Chair, I have a question.
You may proceed, Mr. Al.
Thank you, Mr. Fouquet, for that presentation. You're very thorough and you're very well versed in the planning industry, and thank you for that presentation. You made mention that the relocation of the drive-through further down Mililani Street could be a potential option. Amongst you and your clients, are you willing to move it maybe more up to on the main road in the other direction, or maybe in the middle of the property? I just want to know if you're open to potentially or possibly relocating the drive-through to get it farther away from the main road.
Well, I think that, like as the staff pointed out, you know, Mililani Street currently has I believe the right-of-way is only 40 feet. And like, because the developer would already have to provide an additional 20 feet of right-of-way along that section, you know, to make it like fully conforming a 60-foot wide right-of-way. So over and beyond that, then you'll have like another, I would imagine like a 10 or 15 feet of setback. So effectively from your current location to the, you know, where the drive-through may be situated, you may be looking at an additional 40 feet. But in addition to that, it may have to be further setback to accommodate the landscaping requirements, because the landscaping requirements is perimeter. It's not like, you know, like within the project, it's also perimeter as well. Specifically to answer your question about whether the applicant would be willing to kind of relocate that, I would have to defer to Mr. Rudderman as far as whether they would want to relocate it. But I think one of the reasons why the architect came up with that scheme is that visibility, you know, and so the further I don't know which direction, east, you take it, along Mililani Street, then, presumably you have less visibility of a drive-through, kind of complex. So I think there is a kind of balance. I think there is a possibility to have it relocated. How far down, as far as along Mililani Street? I think it becomes a business decision that Mr. Rudderman would have to make.
Can I ask my second question, Chair?
You may proceed.
Okay, yeah. So my second question is also probably the question of Chair Aguinaldo to as far as access to the property. Is the developer willing to eliminate the Mililani entrance just so that would substantially reduce traffic on Mililani Street? And I just want to know if that's an option, if that's even viable.
Well, the reason why the architect came up with this system is that, you wanted to disperse the traffic. By having multiple access into the site, what you do is you disperse the traffic. If you have it all only on one area, then it compounds, the situation. Now, along Kekuanoa Street, we know very definitely you cannot do, reasonably do a left turn, into that area. And that's the reason why it was specifically structured to be like a right in, right out, But if that's the case, then you have to ask yourself, if I'm coming down on Kekuanoa Street, how can I get into the site? And the only way is that you do have to make a left turn on Mililani Street, which is a designated area. And that's the reason why Mililani Street was specifically designed to be like a full movement access. But once you get into the site, then you can disperse in so many different ways. And so that was the concept. I think the other way is that to look at it is, where we at the county building right now, if we're over there and we want to get to the site, I probably would go down on Kamehameha Avenue and go down on Mililani and make a right turn, do all right turn movements. If I wanted to go there, rather than going down on Kekuanoa and trying to negotiate a left. I mean, so you have that kind of multiple options, and that's the objective. So specifically to answer your question, I think I would not recommend the removal of full movement access on Mililani Street.
Thank you. I yield.
Chair, this is Commissioner Lin.
You may proceed, Mr. Lim.
I just have I think we're getting a little off topic on the purpose of this application. It's regarding the coastal resources, and we're talking about the development of the site itself. So I think we should focus on the coastal resource management here on the purpose of the SMA permit. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Rafferty had a question.
Yeah, it's not a question, it was just a comment, and it was in line with what the Commissioner just talked about. But also just to offer my contribution to the discussion about traffic and noise. I think that homeowner, she was most concerned about the noise, and I'm pretty sure I'm very thankful to hear that Mr. Fouquet's presentation that they're willing to to work with the neighbors, the community, that they could come up with some kind of amenable solutions to issues that are brought up. And for example, that call box, if they probably can, orient it so that it faces the main road, Kekuanoa, so that it blares out that way. It blares toward the commercial buildings on Kekuanoa instead of blaring toward Mililani across the road. So I'm very thankful, and I'm glad to hear that the applicant is willing to work with department, public works department to address these issues, and planning department. So I'm grateful there. My other comment was what the Commissioner Lin was talking about, the coastal resources, the coastal area. I wanted to hear from the staff how, I guess in the presentation, I wanted to see where, you get the Waikia Pond, what kind of impact is this development will have on the Waikia Pond. I know we're probably not that very close to it, but since we just heard in the presentation and hearing all these all the documents that we have, that all the water will be contained on site. All runoffs will be contained on site. So there's no chance for any runoffs from this development to go into the fish pond or into the Waikia Pond, right?
Correct, Commissioner. One of the conditions in the recommendation report does require that the applicant shall keep all of those measures within the subject property. All development generated runoff shall be disposed of on site and shall not be directed towards any of the other adjacent properties, which would also include the Waikia Fish Pond.
All right, thank you. I think I'm okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Okay. At this time, we will make a motion for action. Commissioners, I will entertain a motion for action.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Mr. Rao, you may proceed.
I move to approve applicant Island Naturals Properties LLC SMA 21-000079 for approval for SMA permit.
I second the motion.
Hey, any discussion on the motion?
I have one thing, and it could be a mistake, but I believe Mr. Ruderman raised his hand a few moments ago. Maybe he wanted to say something. I'm not sure. He might.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Pogue. I realize it might be more appropriate for me to speak after the vote. I just wanted to say aloha to everybody and thank you. That's all. I didn't have anything of substance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ruderman.
I will do that after the vote.
Okay. So any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, may I say something, please?
You may go ahead, Mr. Rafferty.
Well, I just wanted to say, I just want to thank the applicant for this project. It's an area that has been left. A while ago, it was an area that within that area, there was a crime committed in that area. Not in that specifically in that particular lot, but nearby, because it was bushy, it was kind of like dark, and so there was one time where a body was discovered in that area, in that general area closer to the park. So it's I'm glad that somebody actually looking at that. I was kind of worried about that arsenic. But I'm glad to hear that they mitigate that arsenic issue, because I know that area was pretty thick with arsenic. So thank you, and I'm very happy that somebody's looking into it, and it's going to be it's going to gotta bring some kind of vibrancy to that area. So thank you very much, applicant.
I also have one as a vice chair. Is I would like to thank the applicant, Mr. Ruderman, and the planning consultant, Mr. Fuki. It's a development within our community and within our district and town that provides work. I'm always an advocate of where do the people go? People need to work. And also their approach on how to mitigate and how to take into consideration of the neighbors or neighborhood on there to address their concerns and how to handle that as well. So I just very pleased and thankful for that. And if there's no other discussion on the motion,
Mr. Chair.
Staff, roll call vote, please. Yes,
Mr.
you may
Chair,
proceed, Mr. Al.
I do have just a quick comment. I just also like to echo my fellow commissioners and thank the applicant for coming up with a project like this. It's nice to see a local Big Island developer doing a job. They're a local business, hiring local people, servicing the local community. And what's more important is that the developer is willing to work with the community and the neighbors. And I have to disagree with Commissioner Lin. He did say that, we should focus on coastal management. This is part of it. This is part of the process, and we have to talk about these things, and we need to discuss this because the developer needs to know what the concerns are in the community. And just want to thank the developer. I just want to thank, Sydney, Russell for coming up with this project. And, we have all the faith in you that you will do what's best for the neighbors and the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Al. At this time, staff roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. With that, we'll take the roll call. Commissioner Al.
Aye.
Commissioner Rafferty.
Aye.
Commissioner Clarkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Galimba.
Aye.
Commissioner Lin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Aguinaldo.
Aye.
And Chair Replogo.
Aye.
With that, the motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Commissioners.
Yes, you will be notified of the Commission's decision in writing. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Mr. Vice Chair, I think Mr. Ruderman is ready to make his comment.
If I may, I don't want to be.
Mr. Ruderman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
You may proceed.
Thank you. This is unofficial, but I just want to thank all of you folks, not just for your actions and consideration today, but the work you do all year. And I want to thank Sydney for representing us so well. And I want to introduce you all to my CEO, Rahul Gadbole, who's not as well known to you guys as I am, but he's the one that's done all the work, 100% of the work, in my opinion, to bring this project to this point. And, I want to introduce him to you all if you don't know him as a part of our community. And I want to assure you that, the residents' concerns are taken to heart. We want to develop a corner of Hilo that's desirable and nice and an improvement to our entire community in every possible way. And that is our goal and our intention. And thank you for those of us that acknowledge, those of you who acknowledge that. I just want to say thank you. And although I know so many familiar faces here, I just want to say hi to everybody. Thank you. Hello, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Ruderman.
Mr. Vice Chair, if If I may
Yes,
suggest
Mr.
a
Chair.
5 to 10 minute recess while we transition to the presentation.
Oh, yes. So at this time, to my fellow commissioners and staff, we will take a 5 to 10 minute recess, and we will be back in session shortly after that. So Maya, you will let us know? Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, let's
All right.
take a
Thank you.
recess till 10:40.
Amen. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Xichao, would you like to share your screen on that end? Or would you like us to put up the presentation? You're on mute.
Maya, if you can put the presentation, it would be better in case we get stuck here. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
But we'll have to, Maya, I'm John.
Hi, John.
We'll have to ask you to advance the
Yep.
slides.
No problem.
So
No
either ask for next slide or signal.
Okay,
Okay,
that
thank
sounds
you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maya, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So do we,
Let's wait until we have quorum of commissioners turning on their cameras.
okay, perfect.
There we go.
Let me slide. Oh, okay.
That was making me hungry. This isn't fair.
Everyone, all right, let me go back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now proceed to the approval of minutes. It is now 10:43 a.m. Commissioners, I trust all of you have received and reviewed the minutes of April 1st, 2021 meeting. May I hear any corrections or in motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now the motion has been approved. Administrative matters. Staff, any administrative matters at this time?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Aguinaldo. So we are very fortunate to have two planners from the State Office of Planning here today. We have Xichao Li and John Nakagawa, and they will be giving a presentation overview of the Coastal Zone Management Program and Special Management Area permitting from the state of Hawaii perspective. After that, we'll have a little question and answer session. And then Alex and I will be giving a presentation on special management area permitting, shoreline permitting from a Hawaii Island perspective. And then we'll also do a question and answer session after that. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and hand the presentation over to Xichao and John. And I don't know, Xichao, if you would like to wait for questions at the end, or if it would be more comfortable for you to do questions throughout the presentation.
Thank you, Maya. I would say can be in the process, during the presentation, they can ask a question, can stop me if they have a question to ask from commission. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? It should say Hawaii Coastal Zone Management. Thank you.
Okay. Chair Aguinaldo, your permission to proceed, please.
Yes, you may proceed.
Okay. I'm using a microphone that's far away. Can everyone hear me? First of all, yes? Okay. First, I'd like to, commissioners, like to thank you very much for this opportunity to make this presentation about the Hawaii Coastal Zone Management Program. My name is John Nakagawa. I'm a planner with the CZM program. Today, I'm standing in for Justine Nihipali, who is the manager of the CZM program. She had an unexpected absence today, so we apologize for that. With me is Xichao Li, who is also a planner with the CZM program. His title is statewide SMA coordinator, and he will be providing the information on the SMA permit system. Mike, can you please advance to the next slide?
Yes. Well, there we go.
And if you have a question or you want to interject or anything, please, let's keep this informal because we want it to be a two-way discussion, really. So to begin with, the National Coastal Zone Management Act was enacted by Congress back in 1972. The CZM Act itself is administered by a federal agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is under the U.S. Department of Commerce. Now, when Congress adopted the CZM Act, they did so with a national policy to preserve, protect, develop, and where possible, to restore or enhance the resources of the coastal zone for this and succeeding generations. Very important statement. They also determined that coastal states, that's us and you, are in the best position to manage the coastal zone. Rather than be top down, they wanted it to be ground level up from the states. And for us, that includes you as a county. Next slide, please. Now, the National CZM program is actually a voluntary program for states to participate. It's not mandatory. So given that Congress provided built-in 2 incentives for states to participate. And on the slide, you see the 2 basic incentives. The first is a provision of federal funds for state planning and administration of the program. And the second incentive, which is very important, is the privilege of administering the Federal Consistency Review Program. And I'll touch on that briefly in a little while. So nationally, all 35 coastal and Great Lakes states and territories like Guam, CNMI, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, are part of the program, with the one exception being Alaska. Alaska chose to withdraw from the national program back in 2011. Next slide, please, Maya. So in addition to federal funding for state and county CZM program administration, federal funds are available through other CZM funding opportunities. And we've got 2 up here. One is a competitive grant opportunity, and the other is Projects of Special Merit. Project of Special Merit allows the CZM program to further enhance certain areas, strategically really focusing on initiatives such as wetlands, coastal hazards, cumulative and secondary impacts, and ocean resource management. Next slide, please. So after the National CZM Act was enacted, Hawaii's response was immediate. And in 1973, the state legislature enacted what was called Act 164 to mandate development of a statewide CZM program that conformed with the National Act. In 1977, the Hawaii CZM law was enacted and codified as, you all know, Chapter 205A of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. And out of Chapter 205A, Part 2 is the Sma permit system, and Part 3 is the Shoreline Setback variance. In 1978, the U.S. Department of Commerce officially approved the Hawaii CZM program, conveying state eligibility to receive administration grants, as well as administer the Federal Consistency Review Program. We are proud, and Hawaii County was very much involved in development of the program, that we were one of the earliest states, one of the first states to join the National CZM program, and that was back in 1978. My next slide. Just to give you a context organizationally where we are in the state system, we're located within the State Office of Planning, which is administratively attached to the State Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. And within Office of Planning is where we reside, specifically as a program within Office of Planning. Office of Planning as well as CZM program works very closely, actually in partnership with the county, state agencies and federal government, as well as community stakeholders. Maya, next slide, please. So we receive direct federal funds, and we receive approximately $2 million in federal funds annually. And this funding annually supports the statewide CZM program and funds also county administration of the Special Management Area Permit System. So we currently, CZM program currently funds 14 positions across the counties, not excluding Seating County of Honolulu. So just to give you an idea, for Hawaii County for fiscal year 2020-2021, we are providing $532,500. Of that, 466, approximately 466 plus is in federal funds, and that's annually. So it's quite a substantial amount. And the importance of this really is the SMA permit system is part of our federally approved program, the program that was approved by NOAA. And you, planning commissioners and planning commission collectively, as the authority for issuing decisions on SMA permits and shoreline setbacks, you are an essential partner in implementing our statewide program. So you're part of the statewide program, which is part of the national program. Very important part of who we are and what we do. And we also we operate in partnership and also an oversight role with the counties to ensure that the implementation of the program is done consistently. Next slide, please, Maya. So the state program basically has two components. One is the regulatory responsibilities and the other is program initiatives. Regulatory responsibilities are federal consistency and then SMA and shoreline setbacks, which I won't get into because Si Chow will speak on that. On the program initiative side, examples of our primary initiatives include Ocean Resources Management Plan, Coastal Hazards, Coastal Nonpoint Pollution Control Program, and our Marine and Coastal Zone Advocacy Council. Maya, next, please. I'd like to touch very briefly on federal consistency. Federal consistency is a very valuable management tool for the states and actually the counties too, in that it gave the states the ability to have some decision-making on federal actions. And our review covers federal agency activities, federal permits such as Army Corps of Engineers permits, and also selected federal financial assistance. We often consult with the planning department on federal consistency reviews for county input, and Hawaii County Planning Department staff has been very helpful in some of our reviews, providing county level input that we then factor into our reviews. Next slide, please. One of our primary or most important initiatives is the Ocean Resources Management Plan, which began in 1985. The RMP is another important component of using the CZM, putting the CZM network concept together. And CZM network concept, I forgot to mention, the CZM program in Hawaii is based on the model of a network approach. Some states, such as California, take a central approach. They have like a super agency. We've taken a network approach that builds on partnerships of state agencies and county agencies, as well as the county authorities, such as yourself, Planning Commission, and really puts all these agencies and programs together into our one program. So through the Ocean Resources Management Plan, it lets us express and facilitate the working of all these partners. The latest update was done last year in 2020, and it established 3 focus areas for implementation action. The first focus area is development and coastal hazards. The second is land-based pollution, such as polluted runoff, as you discussed in your SMA discussion this morning. And third, marine ecosystems. Maya, next slide, please. Another very important initiative for our program is coastal hazards. And as an example of a project that we are involved in is probabilistic tsunami design zone maps for the state of Hawaii. So far, we've done high resolution mapping for Oahu, and we are in process to develop high resolution probabilistic, it's a mouthful, maps for the other major islands. Next slide, Maya. The Coastal Nonpoint Pollution Control Program, which is whose mission is to control, to reduce polluted runoff to coastal waters, is a very important part of our program. It's actually mandated by federal law that we have our program, develop our program, and have it approved by NOAA. Currently, we're one of 9 CZM programs nationally that has not yet received full approval. There are many components. We have, it says here 5 out of 49. On Tuesday, we got 1 of the 5 approved. So now there are 4 remaining components left to be approved. We are working closely with Hawaii County on 1 of the components, which is runoff from roads, highways, and bridges. It's quite an undertaking, but with county cooperation, we're gaining some ground on this. Next slide, please. We also have our Marine and Coastal Zone Advocacy Council, which was founded in 2001. It's known by its acronym, which is MACSAC. MACSAC is a public advisory body. They are all non-government members. There are 12 of them. And their core responsibilities are to evaluate the state season program, to advocate and act upon citizen input, and work toward program implementation. So on that, they have formed their own working groups. They're a voluntary organization. They put their own time in. They have quarterly meetings. Before pandemic, they would each quarter rotate through the various counties. They advocate, they welcome public input, and they, again, prior to pandemic, did site visits. So for Hawaii Island, there are 2 representatives on MACSAC presently. The chair of MACSAC is Phil Fernandez, and he is from Kona. And the second Hawaii Island representative is Robert Nishimoto, and he is from the Hilo site. So that's a very brief and broad overview of the national state program, and wanted to emphasize how much an important part you commissioners are, a part of this. And we rely on you, and you're very much an essential part. So now I'd like to turn it over to Sichao Lee, who will present on SMA permit system. Oh, well, if you have questions, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we can wait at the end and do a wrap up that way. And feel free to interrupt.
Thank you, John.
Any
Okay,
questions to the commissioners? You may proceed.
Okay.
Thank you, Commission Chair, Vice Chair, and Commission members for this opportunity. And thanks to the Alex and Maya for help us to schedule this opportunity. I just give my background. I come to the Hawaii CZM program about 13 years ago. I originally from China, but I get a degree in geography and planning certificate. So I'm really happy to present today regarding Sma permitting and Shoreline setbacks. So these slides really specialize, gives a summarize of Hawaii CZM program network. So you can see, John, could you maybe you?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. So could you will see this kind of summarize the diagram, can see how the Hawaii CZM program become network. You can see the shoreline over there and also shoreline setback line over there. So the jurisdiction between state and the counties is a shoreline. So everybody knows that in Hawaii. But the shoreline setbacks also a really important line for the county. Between shoreline and shoreline setback line is a shoreline area. It's a much more sensitive area. And then also you can see the enforceable policy is from state and county agency. That's why Hawaii CZM program is network program. Maya, could you, for the next slide, please? Yes, before we talking about the Sma permitting, we have to talk about the shoreline setbacks. You can see the left slide, the picture, you can see the red line is the shoreline, shoreline is the blue and the red line is the setback line. The jurisdiction between county and the state is the shoreline. But you can see the slides, you can see the categories is new structures and the existing structures. For shoreline setbacks, we deal with the new structures. We ask for shoreline setback. This means give the space for shoreline protection, beach processes, and also reduce the risk of coast hazards and keep open space along the shoreline. That's the purpose of shoreline setbacks is prohibit structures within shoreline area. Then existing structure have other strategy like accommodation, protection, retreat. There's much more related to the existing structure, also much more tough, much more hard, because this is already there. Just let you know, the history of shoreline setbacks is start from 1970, totally before CZM program. Also that time, shoreline setback is not used law under the chapter 12.5A, chapter 12.5 instead of chapter 12.5A. So 1986, the transfer shoreline setbacks to the 12.5A from 12.5, they become CZM part, the part 3. So it's just these kind of things. That's why shoreline setbacks much more looks like a land use policy. It's a prohibited structures within shoreline area. Next slide, please. So this is just give the visualized purpose to see what's the meaning or what's a Sma looks like. Sma area is extended inland from and along the shoreline. You can see the picture can see the landscape totally different. Sma area, normally the low rise the structure, but the inland side, outside the Sma, much more high rise the structure. This is the Kaka'ako area. We can see the difference. But Sma at the beginning, since 1975 start, is a much more shoreline related and ocean water related. So that's the original purpose of Sma area. Is a concept of regional concept. Is not a parcel by parcel, but is an area concept for Sma. It's called special management area. Next slide, please. So this is the purpose of Sma permitting. You can see we emphasize is along the shoreline, within area along the shoreline to protect the coastal resources and avoid the foreclosure of management options, and also ensure the public access to the beach and the shoreline or ocean recreation area. That's the original purpose of Sma permitting. And at that time, as I mentioned before, 1975 Act 176 is called Shoreline Protection Act. So you can see the name of the act is called Shoreline Protection Act. That's the original purpose of Sma permitting. Next slide, please. So Sma permitting, you and the Planning Commission and the authority, you already know the meaning. Sma permit is the first permit for development. That's really, really interesting, also really important, because Sma permit and the major Sma permit will need the public hearing. That's why as the first permit, the public from time to time, they treat SMA permit as land use policy instead of as a permissible land use. So that SMA permit is not a land use policy. It's a kind of already allowed by the land use policy. In Hawaii, they have 3 types of land policies. Land use commission, right? They decide urban, agricultural, regional, and conservation. And the DNR, the board decide the conservation district policies. And the county council, they decide land use policy in county area, especially in urban area. So this kind of is land use policy issue. This is before SMA permitting. And also SMA permitting and the 205A required. All development should first get an SMA permit before they get other permits. So no agency can issue the other permit before the SMA permit. If SMA permit cannot get that, they cannot proceed to the other permits. So SMA permit is the first permit. And also they give back to the public hearing, public participation for SMA permitting procedures. Next slide, please. Then here we can see the county authority for SMA permitting. The other 3 counties, Hawaii County, Hawaii, Maui, is always a planning commission. I know 2009, the Hawaii County have the 2 planning commission right now, Windward and Windward planning commission, before only 1 planning commission. But the city county Honolulu is different. The city council is an authority. I know at the beginning of this year, they try to get the planning commission as an authority, but they have to get the county, the code to change this kind of things. Otherwise, they cannot change it to planning commission as an authority. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the boundary of SMA area in general, statewide, based on GIS program. The data is 2013 mostly. You can see these boundaries along the shore, along each island, along the shoreline. But county planning commission or county authority, they can amend their SMA boundary as necessary or anytime. I know each county SMA rules or ordinance, they can initiate the SMA boundary amendment. For extension, planning commission is a determination for the SMA boundary extension, but for contraction as a 205A requirement, they must go to the leading agency office of planning to get a determination for contraction. So they're based on the 205A section 23. Next slide, please. So this is the guidance and the CZM objective and policies and SMA guidance. I heard this morning also talk about the SMA guidance, the 205A section 26 SMA guidance. Really, really important for SMA permitting procedure process. So CZM program have 10 objectives and also supporting policies. You can see this listed up there. For SMA guidelines, we can see SMA permitting mostly is for mitigation measures. They ask SMA authority to approve or deny, but when approved, they have reasonable terms and conditions for SMA permitting, like the SMA permitting conditions. The condition supposedly and also should be under the CZM law 205A, the context. SMA permitting cannot include everything. SMA permitting only regulatory tools to contribute to CZM objective and policies. For example, sometimes we can see SMA permitting condition, they put a social crime, also like traffic. If purely traffic issue, that's beyond the SMA. If traffic relates to the public access to beach, to shoreline, to ocean recreation area, they will have a logical relationship with the CZM program. We cannot use SMA including everything. Otherwise, SMA permitting will be targeted by public and also by applicant also potentially get a lawsuit when we put the condition over there, we must enforce the SMA permitted condition. That's the reason we have to be really careful for SMA permitting condition. It must be reasonable under the CZM objective policies and the SMA guidelines. Next slide, Maya, please. So SMA, when get assessment, the SMA, the 1258, section 22, they have definition about development. You will see from 1258 CZM law, make the development much more broad and possible, give the authority to planning commission to decide whether or not action is a development or not. Even they have an exclusion list of the, for non-development, like say, single family residency or repairs, all this kind of stuff, they can be exempt. But at the end of the list, also provide, say, if authority find the significant impact, including cumulative impact, the action can still be development. So this means, as your planning commission as the authority, you have authority to decide whether or not is the action is development or not. But the development is much more broad than exclusion list. For single family residency, you can see that this is a picture I took in 2008 from Maui. At that time, this development single family residency is exempt from SMA. But today, especially last year, Act 16, we will talk about it much more in detail. Act 16, Session Law 2020, they emphasize the location of the single family residency and also the size will decide whether or not it is a development. But for repairs, they can be exempt. It's not a development, depending on the assessment and also review. Maya, please, next slide. After we decide, like a planning department staff or planning department review and also submit to the planning commission to review, to make a decision. After we decide the action is not development, then exempt. If become development, then can be decided is a major SMA permit or minor SMA permit. When two factors, one is the significant impact, the other one is the cost threshold. Since 2011, the cost threshold between SMA major and minor, the increase from $125,000 become $500,000. This is an automatically trigger for between SMA major and SMA minor. Next slide, please. So this one is really important also because the terms always be applied, say, cumulative impacts. I know this definition from the chapter 344, also the OEQC, the EAEI's administrative rules, chapter 11, 200.1 after the amendment, that including past, present, and future actions. So this, our slides provide some framework to how to assess cumulative impacts. We ask the CZM criteria over there based on the CZM objectives and policies, and also based on SMA guidelines. We also ask the time and the spatial frame to make an assessment. We suggest past 5 years as a minimum, and the future 5 years and the minimum also can be lifespan of the project structure. And also we assess all these kind of action combined, how they impact the SMA area. They will decide for the cumulative impacts. I know for the time being, EAEIS, they didn't provide this kind of framework. Sometimes the applicants just make a statement and say, okay, we don't have a cumulative impact, but they didn't provide this basic information. What's the past action? What's the current situation action? And what's the future potential action? So all these three parts and up is a benefit for cumulative impacts assessment. Next slide, please. So this is Act 16. for Act 16 that have the amendment to 205A, I think last year we provided guidance to each county planning department for this amendment, this kind of amendment. Also, this year we post our website, SMA website, for FAQs regarding Act 16 amendment to 205A. So everybody can access to this website to see what's the general question regarding this amendment. You can see the Act 16, the amendment list of development and non-development. When you pay attention, you can see before demolition can be development and also can be non-development. But for this amendment, demolition is to get rid of away of development list. Then also Act 16 increase minimum shoreline setbacks from 20 feet to 40 feet. And I said before, since 1970, the shoreline setback minimum setback line is 20 feet. Then we didn't change that since 1970. Of course, county can get a much larger shoreline setback requirement, but the 205A since last year, Act 16 amendment minimum requirement right now is 40 feet. I know county Hawaii SMA rules for the time being before Act 16, the minimum is 20 feet. Then also the Act 16 and the definition and silverize to the definition of cost hazards. That's also really important. So we make this kind of changes for definition. Also definition for beach. This is the first time we get this definition from a Hawaii status law, give definition of beach. Even DNR status law, we didn't find this kind of definition. So this is the first time we give the definition of the beach. So also important amendment from Act 16 is a restrict or prohibit shoreline hardening structures in front of the beaches. So private sector cannot ask for shoreline hardening structure like seawalls and the revetments in front of the beaches. So it will be prohibit shoreline hardening structures. Next slide, please. So I mentioned already before the amendment for development. One important development amendment is regarding single family residency. Since 1975, when SMA start from before CZM program, SMA already start from county because as John pointed out already, CZM program since 1977, they are approved by LOA 1978, but SMA start from 1975. Yeah, at that time, single family residency always exempt from SMA permit. But right now you can see when the single family residency located on the shoreline parcel, there will be trigger SMA permit requirements, no matter what kind of size they are. Also, if located on a parcel is impacted by waves, storm surges, or high tides, or shoreline erosion, even the parcel is not a shoreline parcel, they still trigger SMA permit requirement for single family residency. Next slide, please. So this is just when we provide guidance to the county planning department, we give this guidance, say, okay, we can use silverize exposure area 0.5, the full silverize scenario to assess whether a long shoreline parcel can be impacted by waves, storm surges, high tide, or shoreline erosion. This is to try to help the county planning department to assess whether a long shoreline parcel will be triggered for SMA permitting requirement for single family residency. Next slide, please. Yeah, we already discussed this before for 40 feet shoreline setback requirements. So county right now, SMA rules or ordinance cannot give the 20 feet and the minimum requirement. So 40 feet means some parcel or some development structure within 40 feet will require shoreline setback variance, but variance is not a permit, it's an exemption to prohibition. So variance doesn't mean when you apply, you will get approved. It's different from Sma permit. It's not a concept of development or non-development, it's a structure issue. So that's a shoreline setback variance requirement. Next slide, please. And I said before, this is definition of the beach. This is first time in Hawaii state law gives the beach, not only just the beach area, but also the sand dunes and the near shore submerged area, also including at the beach area and the beach. So the purpose is for public access, recreation, and coastal ecosystem, and also provide natural buffer zones to against the coastal hazards. So that's really important. I know some existing structure too close to shoreline, then when shoreline erosion happen or shoreline something happen, there will be really difficult, get trouble for this kind of existing structure. Retreat is really important, but really difficult also. This picture from Oahu Sunset Beach, you can see single family residency at that time, mostly on the sand dunes. So really, really tough. Next slide, please. So this is just gives a brief introduction for CZM objective amendment. This is the policies, the prohibited construction of private shoreline hardening structure. This is an amendment from Act 16 last session that 2020. Really important to emphasize. I think each county shoreline setbacks rules or ordinance should be amended according to this requirement. For public structures or agency or some action, they minimize. This means for public interest, they can be still can do some shoreline hardening, but really have to be also minimize shoreline hardening structure in front of the beaches. Next slide, please. So this is just back to the, we already showed some examples. This hardening structure for the after Act 16 will be prohibited. And but if we're interested in the interest of the general public, then still can be shoreline hardening. But the interest of the public interest have some definition or framework. What's the meaning of public interest? So the slides just show here. We can see public safety, like public infrastructure, and also protection, beach protection, sand retention or restoration, all these kinds of things can be interest of the public interest. So that's the potential for shoreline hardening structures. Next slide, please. That's all. Thank you, Maya. Any question? And also we try to answer, yeah.
Thank you, Shitala.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why did Alaska leave the program?
I don't exactly know why they chose not to participate. There were some factors that I think they felt was in their best interest to just operate as a state program. As a state program participating in the federal program, we have obligations on grant requirements, on reporting, on a semi-annual basis. We meaning you folks too as county, contribute to what's called a performance measurement metric system. So there's a lot of strings attached to the federal grant, although it is substantial. Like I said, Hawaii County, we provide for upwards about $460,000 annually in federal funds, and then plus some general funds. So we feel it's worth it because we also gain the federal consistency review, but Alaska chose not to for government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're the only state. Good question. Yeah, yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, I'm just curious, does the prohibition on shoreline hardening that was enacted recently apply to all existing structures or only structures that are completed or permitted from now on?
Yes. Yes, thank you for the question. That's for new structures. Existing structure is already existing, and I presented before. For shoreline setbacks requirement is for new structures. But if existing structure enlarge or change something more than existing, they will be required for shoreline setback variance also. The Act 16 effective September 15, 2020. That's the time for effective date. Thank you.
Other question? Commissioner Al. Commissioner Al.
I know this is a multi-layered question, and if you can just answer it in a brief statement, because I know we're going into the county presentation. My question is about enforcement. I understand you guys implement the program, approve it, get it going. What is the process? And again, I know it's multi-layered, different agencies, state, county, government. What happens if there's a violation?
Well, the violation at the county level, if it's an SMA violation, starts with the planning department. Planning commission as the authority that issued the SMA permit, possibly if it's not a minor permit, has, I believe, some factor. Each commission is a little different, so I'm not familiar with each commission's rules. And then as a state program, we do have oversight over county programs. So enforcement on our part is not direct enforcement. We don't have enforcement provisions or enforcement actions. Our federally approved program builds in a component of what's called monitoring enforcement. What we look for are patterns of noncompliance. So if a county planning commission, county planning department repetitively approves shoreline structures that shouldn't be approved, then we may step in and question them administratively. Oftentimes we get calls directly from the public saying, oh, this SMA permit was issued, how come? It shouldn't have been, can you look into it? We don't automatically start an enforcement action or anything like that. We don't really have an enforcement provision. We work with you folks, we work with the county planning department, get information, ask questions, and only in the exceedingly rare situation where there needs to be some sort of action taken, then we would proceed that way. But there's no provisions that say if you violate that we're going to withhold 10% funding or anything like that. There's nothing like that. But yes, you're right. In that it is multi-layered. Yes, Commissioner Al.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for that comment. Thank you for answering the best you can. Thank you.
Any other questions anybody have? Okay, seeing none, again, thank you, commissioners, for your time and your attention. We really appreciate this opportunity to brief you, to provide an overview, a broad overview of CZM program and SMA and shoreline setback. And in your operations, if you've got questions, of course, you work directly with the planning department. We work very closely with the planning department, and so we can also be approached. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Shi Chao. You're welcome to hang around for our presentation as well if you'd like. Alex, did you want to run the PowerPoint or would you like me to?
I can go ahead and do that.
Okay, great.
I got it up and ready. So I'll just go ahead and delve into it. Thanks, Shi Chao and John. I appreciate your time.
So Alex and I want to just provide a little bit more of the county's perspective on the coastal zone management and SMA permitting process. And I apologize, there is going to be a little bit of repeat from Shi Chao's presentation, but hopefully not too much. So Alex, can you forward the slide? Thanks. So how does the county regulate the special management area and shoreline setback area? As Chow mentioned, the authority is in Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 205A. And this section of law provides authority to the planning commissions of Hawaii County to administer that law. And I'm just going to kind of dive into Commissioner Al's question of enforcement and who regulates enforcement. So for our county, the statute says that the commission is supposed to enforce the SMA law and the shoreline setback law. I'm sorry, the SMA law. In Hawaii County, the way our rules are written, the planning commissions have given the authority, delegated the authority to the planning director to enforce the SMA area. So we issue a notice of violations if we receive complaints for the SMA area. And the director also has the authority to enforce violations in the shoreline setback area. Let's see. So the rule that we created in our county to implement HRS 205A is Rule 9 of the Planning Commission Rules of Practice and Procedure. That's called the SMA Area Rule of the county. And it basically says no development shall be allowed within the SMA without obtaining a permit in accordance with the rule. It defines what activities, uses, and structures are considered development and what are not considered development. And then the director always has the ability, or the commission has the ability, to consider a use that may be exempt from the definition of development to require a minor or major permit if there are cumulative impacts or significant adverse environmental or ecological impacts to the SMA. And feel free to interrupt me if you have questions along the way. Can you go to the next slide, Alex? So when we get an SMA assessment application, there's 3 possible outcomes that can occur. We look at the proposed activity or use, and we determine whether it is considered development or not considered development based on the Planning Commission rules. If the action is not considered development, then it is exempt, so long as it does not generate any cumulative impacts or substantial adverse environmental impacts. So as you know, the planning department issues many SMA exemptions, and those show up on your SMAA log that we provide to you every month. The next outcome that can occur is the project is defined as development and its valuation is less than $500,000. In those situations, the planning department issues an SMA minor permit on behalf of the commission, and those again show up in your log every month. The third outcome would be an SMA major permit. Those are for projects that are considered development and their valuation exceeds $500,000. These can also include projects that normally wouldn't be considered development, but they have a cumulative or substantial adverse impact on the SMA. And as you know, the Planning Commission reviews all SMA major permit applications. So one of the changes that Chow mentioned with Act 16 that was passed last year was probably the biggest change related to the SMA was that prior to Act 16, single-family dwellings on shoreline parcels that were under 7,500 square feet in size were considered exempt from the definition of development. So we would issue an SMA exemption with conditions requiring shoreline setback for ensuring public access along the shoreline and whatnot. With Act 16, that changed, and any single family dwelling on a shoreline parcel or a parcel that's impacted by waves or surges or high tide would require either an SMA minor permit or an SMA major permit, depending on the valuation of the project. So that is probably the biggest change that we've seen from Act 16. This will potentially mean that the Planning Commission may see some more SMA major permits for single family dwellings if the valuation of the project's over $500,000. Additionally, the department, whenever we make an SMA decision, we assess potential effects and significance of the use according to your Planning Commission rules for criteria of substantial adverse effect. Next slide, please, Alex. I think, Alex, you're going to go into the substantial adverse effects, yeah?
Yeah. So Maya and I talked about how best to present this so you guys understand how the commissioners understand how we review SMA applications and the criteria. In this idea of substantial adverse effect is provided under PC Rule 9, and that kind of outlines all the different criteria, and I'll go through them, quickly here. So number one involves an irrevocable commitment to loss or destruction of any natural or cultural resources. So that includes historic sites, view planes. So we look into, is there a commitment to destruction or something that can't be mitigated? That is something that we need to know. Both natural and cultural resources have to be addressed. So the applicant needs to explain and outline if there's mitigation, things like that. Does the project curtail the use of the environment? Is there some restriction that this project will impart that restricts the use of the environment in any way? So we need to look into that if that project, possibly affects any environmental use or use by the public. Another one is, does the project conflict with the general plan? So of course we look at the general plan, the LUPEG map, and incorporate that understanding into our review process to ensure that the SMA development is in line with some of the ideas, typically policies and objectives of the general plan, whether it relate to access, public access, or recreation, or even development restrictions. Does the project substantially affect any economic or social welfare of the community or county? So we need to take a look at that. Of course, we support the economic development and moving the county forward, but it has to be tempered with, understanding the social implications of the project. So we have to take into account those. So this is another idea that we look into. Does the project involve secondary impacts? And for example, population changes or impacts to public facilities that are heavily used. This can be right-of-ways, this could be access, this could be structures, but then adding population, a new development or new uses that could increase population in areas that may be over taxed. We take a look at that. So that's something to understand, those secondary impacts. Does a project substantially affect flora or faunal resources? That's a big one. So every SMA, and especially SMA major, needs to have a floral and faunal study or a description of what the applicant believes is going on there. A lot of times with developed sites, there's very little evidence or very little that remains that's native. But again, that needs to be taken into account and reviewed, especially when we're discussing rare threatened species. And that can include ocean species and of course land species. Does the project affect air, water quality, noise levels? So these are typical for construction, but we also take into account that during development, during the use of the proposed project and carrying into the future, will there be air effects, will be water quality effects or noise effects? So we do take that into account. Does the project affect environmentally sensitive areas, floodplains, tsunami zones, erosion prone areas, geologically hazardous areas, estuaries? So not only the shoreline resources, but we try to take a holistic view and make sure that the project is not impacting other environmentally sensitive areas besides the immediate shoreline. And then lastly, we make sure that the project is not contrary to the objectives and policies of the CZM program. And I'm going to kind of go into that, which is another layer of our review, which is the CZM policies. So the applicant must provide kind of a written statement addressing the proposed development in relationship to the objectives of 205A and policies of 205A Hawaii revised statutes. So the objectives are pretty much the same, but the policies are where the meat of the matter are and where we actually delve into the review criteria. So the different policies, I'll go through them real quickly. Recreational resources. Now these again are all in, we can provide that information if you want to delve into more specifics, but these can all be found under 205A. So recreational resources, requiring restoration of coastal resources, providing and managing adequate public access, and protecting coastal resources suited for recreation. So we look at that when a project comes in. Managing adequate public access, that's a big one. We look at existing access, we look at proposed access. Even if access is not deed recorded, we take a look and talk to the community. A lot of times we'll get information from the community on access that has been used for some time. So that's a big one. So, and then making sure that the project doesn't impact coastal resources that could, that are suited for recreation, that where people go and fish, where people go and surf, where people go and hike, where there's gathering or anything like that. We want to make sure that those are protected. Historic resources, of course, identify and analyze any significant archaeological resources and support the state's goals for protection of those historic resources. So if there are any historic resources in the project area, we, of course, will move to the shifting review, and if there's mitigation or preservation, those plans will be implemented, and that's those are things that the commissioners can, of course, condition. Scenic and open space resources. So we want to ensure the new development is compatible with their visual environment. And we work to preserve and maintain and improve the shoreline open space and scenic resources. So we look into, does this project affect or impact the scenic view planes? Does it impact the use of an open space or restrict the use of an open space? Would it take away open space areas that are already being used? So that's what we want to make sure the project doesn't impact those. Coastal ecosystems, the idea, intent of CZM and SMA is to preserve those valuable coastal ecosystems that we all enjoy here in Hawaii, whether that be rocky coastlines, beach areas, bays and bayments for snorkeling and diving, reefs, even dunes, which we don't have a lot of here, but we have a few. And then the object is to minimize the disruption and degradation of those coastal water ecosystems by also effectively regulating stream diversion, stream channelization, drainage. So all those things that could bring effluent or deleterious material to the ocean, we want to, that's part of the review that we want to ensure is included. Economic uses, of course, concentrate coastal development in appropriate areas. This is along the lines with zoning, but in the SMA, yeah, There are certain areas that do promote more development, and then there are areas that don't. So that's part of our review and the commission's review to understand where appropriate development might work. So this continuing on to coastal hazards. So coastal development.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
Back to the coastal ecosystems.
Yes, sir.
All of those things require an application for a development to be looked at and enforced or managed. Am I correct? In other words, if there was coastal property that is being destroyed by use, but there's no development there, there's nothing that the coastal zone management can do about that. Yes or no? Or
well, once you pass into Mackay of the Shoreline, you move into two state agencies out of DLNR. One is the Department of Aquatic Resources, and the other is the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands. So the OCCL manages all land, kind of submerged lands, out to 3 miles. So any impacts to coral reefs and the submerged lands would be the focus, and would have to go through a regulatory process through OCCL and possibly the Board of Land and Natural Resources. DAR, the Division of Aquatic Resources, also through DLNR, manages the state's aquatic resources, animals, things like that. DOH, Department of Health, does a lot of water quality. So you kind of have a lot of different agencies, state agencies, that do try their best to manage that. But I think it's our job and the commissioner's job to ensure that development doesn't add to those impacts. Everybody knows that road runoff, existing drainage that's already set, that's bringing material, sometimes there's not much that we can be doing because it's already constructed or it's already active. But for new development, this is something that we should take into account. Channelization is a big one. For channelizing drainages, say over on the Kona side of this island, that brings water and material very quickly down to the shoreline and could impact it. But again, I think once you get out into the water, then the hope is that DLNR would be able to pick up the reins on that and hopefully provide some protection. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Sort of. My question was more geared to the land that is there now, not out on the reef specifically, but human activity taking place on open space that's destroying it. But I mean, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands at Kalai. There's all kinds of ATV activity and other activities that are going on there. When it rains or the wind blows, the place is being trashed. Archaeologicals, everything there is at risk. But there is no building. There is nothing there except the Department of Hawaiian Homes has, I guess, some form of managerial responsibility.
Yeah,
that's probably off this topic. I'm sorry.
No, it is and it isn't. This is an issue for sure, is unmanaged lands, coastal lands, where we don't have a nexus to impart either conditional protection or preservation or mitigation. Unfortunately, this happens all over the state. Protected areas that don't have development are wide open and a lot of times get overrun. That is something I think maybe the CZM office, could assist us in addressing how we go about, but it's hard to enforce that kind of situation. It's hard for us to provide some kind of enforcement action or violation. I'm just not sure, and that's something maybe we can take up as rules change. Maya kind of touched on it. While we're implementing the changes coming from Act 16 of 205A, we haven't updated PC and PD rules yet to accommodate that. So there's a major update that needs to happen. And that's something that we could, as a county, look into for sure. How to manage lands that are undeveloped but are being impacted by heavy use or recreation. But yeah, you've kind of touched definitely on something that I don't have a direct answer for. I don't know if Shichao or John may have an answer to that. But for right now, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Thank you.
Yep. So just moving on. So to the policies continued here. Coastal hazards. So controlled development, including planning and zoning controls in areas subject to coastal hazards. And this is typically surrounding flood and flood zones. Tsunami, of course, inundation, storm inundation, but this is really relates to flooding, flood zones, and a lot of times you see flood zone X, but when it's flood zone VE or AE, these are times that we have to take a closer look and how upland flooding will then impact the coastal zone in the SMA. Managing development, another policy. Communicate the potential short and long-term impacts of coastal development. So while development is acceptable, we want to make sure that we get the applicant to provide us information that shows long and short-term impacts, even potential ones, so that we can better understand, and that's so the commissioners can better navigate and make a good decision based on the correct information. Public participation, promote public involvement in a coastal zone management process and provide information of coastal zone management issues to the public. So these meetings are public. What we're doing right now is public. Allowing the public to understand development and why we do what we do is always helpful. When they understand how you make a decision, a lot of times it bodes better. When the public doesn't understand why you make a decision, then they get confused and sometimes upset, or there's misinformation that gets thrown out there. So being clear about how you make a decision, how we, the planning department, make a decision is important. And then in making sure that the public is involved in these meetings. Beach protection. Locating new structures inland from the shoreline setback. This is pretty much a no-brainer. At this time, we've all kind of accepted that we've got to move structures back. The kicker is, though, existing development. How do we deal with that? As Shichao said, from the 1970s up until recently, they had a 20-foot setback. We know we're all facing those issues where structures and development are very close to the shoreline, sometimes less than 20 feet, and it can be very detrimental. So locating new structures inland, that's a big one. Conserving open space, prohibiting construction of private and public shoreline hardening. Shichao talked about that, though, the idea is that no new hardening structures should be built. We could go into the science of shoreline hardening and how it actually retards beach growth, but we would want to make sure that that's something we could talk about later, or I will be providing some links for you guys can do some of your own research on that. And then last is the marine and coastal resources. So we want to promote the research of, ocean and coastal processes, impacts of climate change and sea level rise to better understand development impacts to the ocean and coastal resources. And that's on us, the planning department, to provide you guys, like we're doing now, this training, so you better understand what is going on. What does sea level rise mean? What does this mean with climate change? How does that affect how development gets managed? How does that affect your decision to manage development? So it's our job from planning to make sure, but it's also your job as commissioners to understand that this new research, like Shichao has presented, how that affects your decision making. And then lastly, I just want to touch on, and I think it's kind of already been touched on, that SMA is an overlay to the zoning districts. The SMA cannot resolve issues with traffic and sidewalks and things like that, because that's not the intent of that law. Those policies that I've outlined before, that's really the intent of that, is to understand those impacts, long-term, short-term, managing those impacts, mitigating those impacts, and understanding how the natural environment is changing to affect those developments. That's what the SMA is there to do. So I'll turn it over to Maya. Oh no, I've got one more. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn over to Maya for the next slide. We're switching back and forth, so I appreciate your patience.
Thanks, Alex. So as you know, the planning department staff looks at the proposed action. We evaluate it against the criteria that Alex just went through. And then we provide the commission with a background and recommendation report from the planning director. This slide shows the grounds for approval of SMA use permits, which I know you're very familiar with, but I just want to go through them. The permit can be approved upon finding that the development will not have any substantial adverse or environmental effect, or if an action does have a substantial effect, the commission is supposed to look at ways to minimize the adverse effect. Or they can also approve the permit if the adverse effect is clearly outweighed by public health or safety, or if there is some compelling public interest in approving the project despite the adverse environmental effect. The second criteria is that the development is consistent with the objectives and policies of HRS 205A, which Alex just went over. And that the development is consistent with the general plan and zoning, as well as that the development will reasonably protect Native Hawaiian rights if they are found to exist. As you know, the commission has the authority to either approve or deny the application for SMA major permits at a public meeting. And I just want to point out that in the event that the Planning Commission fails to render a decision to approve or deny, the permit is considered denied. Next slide, Alex. So now I want to go into talking a little bit more about the shoreline setback area, and Chi-Chow touched on this with the Act 16 changes. So I want to go a little bit more into detail about that. But before I start off, one of the things that I want to point out that is with Act 16, a major shift that we saw for the shoreline area is the change in the minimum shoreline setback from 20 feet to 40 feet. Prior to Act 16, there were some properties on our island that could qualify for a minimum 20-foot setback. Typically, those were lots that were very shallow, that weren't very deep, or had a very small size lots that had a limited developable area if you apply the zoning setbacks for side yards and the 40-foot shoreline setback. So those properties used to qualify for the 20-foot setback. As of last year with Act 16, any project going forward needs to comply with a minimum 40-foot setback. So I believe one of the commissioners asked, does this apply to old structures or new structures? And it is just new structures. Any old structures, existing structures, prior to Act 16 can be repaired or maintained without needing a shoreline setback variance, but they cannot be enlarged or reconstructed. So the only allowance is for repair and maintenance. Anything beyond that would require a shoreline setback variance, which, as you know, comes before the Planning Commission for approval or denial. Let's see. So when we get an application for a shoreline setback variance, it comes with a EA or EIS or an exemption from HRS Chapter 343, which is the state environmental law. The application also requires a certified shoreline survey to establish the location of the shoreline. And that is established by the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Then once the shoreline is identified and certified, the planning director sets a minimum shoreline setback of 40 feet. And he does have the authority to establish a greater setback if warranted. The director also has the authority to waive the shoreline certification. However, it has the potential to impact the Planning Commission's decision on the variance. Due to, for example, if the director were to waive the shoreline survey certification and for whatever reason the shoreline has moved further in, further Mauka, there's a potential to lose public access along the shoreline. So there are impacts to waiving a shoreline certification. Your Planning Commission rule also sets out the criteria for approving a shoreline setback variance. You can approve them if it's a shoreline dependent facility. For example, uses like piers and any type of boating or recreation where you would need to do it along the shoreline. Those are the types of variances that can be granted. The other criteria for approving a variance would be if it's in the public interest. For example, any county or state projects that are in the public interest. And then the last criteria for approving a variance would be if there's some hardship to the applicant or landowner. There's much more detail provided in our Planning Commission rule related to these three criteria. Let's see. I already went over the minimum 40-foot setback in the Planning Department Rule 11. The section 11.7 lays out which uses or structures are permitted within the shoreline setback area. The department approves minor structures and minor activities without needing a shoreline setback variance if they do not affect beach processes, artificially fix the shoreline, or interfere with public views or access. And just as an example of some minor structures or activities, if a landowner that has a house along the shoreline wants to put a picnic bench within the shoreline setback area near their house, they could do that. We would approve that as a minor structure. It's not a fixed structure, it's movable, it's temporary, it doesn't affect beach processes or access along the shoreline. Some other examples would be like raised wood walkways for public access. We don't require that those get a shoreline setback variance. We consider those minor structures. Minor activities would be some landscaping in the shoreline setback area. And I think that's all I have. Alex, next slide.
All right, I just wanted to kind of beat this drum one last time for the shoreline setback to really give you guys, the commissioners, a really good, clear picture of why it's important. So on the left, you see it's a shoreline certification map approved by BLNR from 2005. And on the right, you see from 2014. So the certified shoreline, again, a shoreline is only certified by the Board of Land and Natural Resources. If a surveyor surveys a shoreline, it's not considered certified until the board approves that. And then it's only good for 1 year. So on the left, you see in a matter of 9 years, a certified shoreline has migrated Mauka thus pushing the 40-foot shoreline setback also, Malcolm. And you can see the difference. Whereas in 2005, a section of that seawall was outside, I mean, inside the 40-foot, and then now the entire thing is inside the 40-foot shoreline setback area. So this is just a matter of 9 years. This is a parcel on the west side. I don't want to get into specifics of where, but this just to give you guys an example of, even on our island, eroding coasts are something that we need to take into account. And so the shoreline setback does migrate, and it's important to understand its current location. And that's why we push for the certified shorelines. I wanted to finish up a couple last slides here. This is further information and on coastal hazards, and then I'm going to get into some of the future work that the planning department is doing. So there's three things that I thought would be important for the commissioners to take a look at, and you'll get a copy of this and you can look at it at your own time. But the Hazard Atlas, this is the Atlas of Natural Hazards in the Hawaii Coastal Zone, done in the early 2000s by Chip Fletcher and others. Went through, and it's every island, but you can, for the Big Island, you can see the different types of hazards that were kind of mapped, the intensity that they thought that these hazards affected the shoreline. So it's a great starting point for understanding some of the hazards that have gone on. But again, it's almost 20 years old, so things have changed. The state's sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report, I think I had mentioned that to the commission previously as a great resource for the objectives of the state, some of the impacts that sea level rise and climate change are having on the state, and some of the ideas the state has about mitigating those impacts, becoming more resilient. So that's a great resource for commissioners on your own time. And then of course the County of Hawaii Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is in the process of being updated for 2020, is something that is being put forth by the county, but relates a lot to all kinds of hazards, not only coastal hazards, but volcanism, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, things like that. So there's some additional information on coastal zone, but know that it covers all the hazards, potential hazards the island can face. So again, I didn't want to go too much into this to bore you guys, but these are some good resources if you want to follow up on your own. Every single one of these links will link you to a PDF that you can access online. And I wanted to just finish off today with giving you an update of what we at the planning department are doing. The planning department is currently moving forth with what we're calling the Shoreline Pursuit Project. And the idea is to study, to build a study to quantify historic shoreline change rates for the island of Hawaii, to determine typology specific setbacks. So when I say typology, I mean rocky shorelines, poly or cliff shorelines, bluffs, sandy shorelines. Those are different type of shoreline typologies. So looking at the different typologies and assessing setbacks based on the hazards associated with those typologies, but also the differences. Of course, a 150-foot tall cliff has a different hazard assessment than, say, a low rocky beach sandy shoreline. And then we want to work to establish research or science-based shoreline and riparian setbacks. So really trying to delve into a quantitative analysis. And so with that, the objective is to effectively reduce risks to people and property from coastal and riparian hazards. So we're not only looking at the coastal zone, but we're taking it inland into these riparian river systems and the impacts and hazards that could be imparted from floods and into these riparian systems. Why are we doing this? Hawaii Island does not have a comparative foundational erosion study similar to just about every other island. So a lot of islands have that to assist them in regulating coastal and riparian hazards. We do not have that. We're kind of on our own. So we're putting this forth to really try to come up with a comprehensive, holistic look at Hawaii Islands coastal and riparian hazards so that we can better assess and manage the coastal zone. We're doing this by using GIS, digital elevation models, LiDAR, which is laser, USGS maps, which are enormous. Xichao mentioned the Solarexa, which is the sea level rise exposure database and mapping. We're using aerial photographs. We have aerial photographs from the 50s, 60s, 70s that helps us to work and compile, see visually how the shorelines have changed. How has development impacted shoreline change? Shoreline certification maps, as I just showed you, those are a great resource to show us how shoreline have changed over time. And then of course, ground truthing, getting out there on the ground and taking a look at some of these important sites so we can better understand and put it all in together. The County of Hawaii Planning Department is kind of spearheading this with money from NOAA and FEMA. We're getting great help on LiDAR through Hilo Geography Department, and then of course the Office of Planning and SOEST are providing us support on this project. So we're really excited. We're just getting started now. So we're looking at, it's going to be, to be comprehensive and to be honest, we're looking at maybe a 3 to 5 year project, but each year we're going to have hopefully outcomes and new policy changes that we can make over time. And with the goal of tackling every inch of shoreline on Hawaii Island by the end of the study. So more money will be needed, more support will be needed, but we really think it's a great thing, great tool for us, for our island moving forward, as it's never really been done before. So I'll end with that. And again, Maya and I would be happy to take any questions you guys might have.
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
Can we look back? I think it was the last page where Rule 9 was discussed.
The ground.
Rule 9.
Is it the grounds for approval or go back?
No, before that.
Criteria. This is the first one.
That's the first. Let's see. It was the one that, I'm going to harp on this. It was the one that included noise as something that the...
That's this one here. So the criteria of substantial adverse effect. Yep. Our review criteria.
Affects air, water quality, or noise levels. And yet today we were instructed not to consider noise levels. I'm just wondering how you guys reconcile that with our rules.
Commissioner Clarkson, this relates more to substantial effects on the coastal resources, not on the population. The concern today was the effect of noise from cars idling or whatnot in the drive-through on a neighbor, whereas this section of PC rule relates more to the effect of noise on coastal resources.
Like coastal fauna.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well then.
Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm just wondering, I'm just looking at the rest of these bullet points.
I think, Commissioner Clarkson, what would be helpful and what I can do is share with all the planning commissioners the topless versus planning commission decision, which directly relates to a case several years ago with the Hawaii County Planning Commission, where the court overturned the Planning Commission's decision on an SMA because they had denied the permit based on traffic issues. So what I'd like to do is share that with all of you. And then if you have further questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, no, I can wait till later.
Any other further questions from any of our commissioners to staff?
Chair, I have a question.
Go right ahead, Mr. Al.
This is not a question. This is more of a comment. I understand there's procedures on the state and the county side, and I know we're talking about whose job is to do what and what role the commissioners play. The state and the county has procedures that need to be followed, and as employees, they have to share with us commissioners the procedures and what can and cannot be done. But our jobs as commissioners, we can say anything. We can't approve anything. We're not getting paid. We're volunteers, so we represent the public. So when concerns get brought up, whether it's irrelevant to what state or county rules are, we can say, and we have to bring it up, and that's part of the process. That's part of the public input process. The state explained their side, the county explained their side in more. The county is more closer to the public, but us commissioners, we're right there with the public. We're volunteers. We represent the public, so we can say things that may or may not be relevant or irrelevant, but we are the layer. And I appreciate, Maya and Alex sharing that, because, we are an important part of this process, and the public only has 3 minutes, but we have the whole meeting, right? So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Commissioner Al. I think that's a good point, and I think that's why it's so important for us to regularly update the Planning Commission rules of practice and procedure so that it reflects what the community wants within the confines of our state law. And along those lines, I know in a previous meeting a few months ago, I said that we're working on updates to our PC rule in order to reflect the changes made in Act 16. We are still working on that. Originally, we had hoped to get that to you in May, but we're trying to bring the EnerGov permitting system online in our department, and that has taken some staff time away from the rule update. So that is still on our radar. We do intend to get that completed after July. And I am open to any suggestions that the commission has to changes that they would like to see in our PC rules. You're welcome to email me any suggestions that you have. And just want to say one last thing. Even though your rules are not up to date with regard to Act 16, the state law supersedes your PC rules. So we, as a department, the recommendations that we provide to you are based on the most up-to-date provisions of law. And yeah. Any other questions? No.
Thank you
so much for
Okay.
that. Yes.
Did any of the commissioners have questions on the SMA log that we sent out? No? Okay. Thank you.
Now that you're all SMA professionals.
If there's no other further questions for staff, can we move forward to announcement? Staff, any announcement?
No, we have no announcements.
Okay, at this time, if there's no further business, may I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting, but before I do, I want to say thank you, Gilbert, and apologize to all of you for the vandals who broke into our cell tower last night.
Wow.
Anyway, thank you very much, Gilbert, and I move
You're
that we
welcome.
adjourn this meeting.
I second that motion.
Awesome. This meeting is adjourned at.
What, we not gonna vote?
Oh, yes. Yes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. I guess I'm getting hungry. This meeting is adjourned at 12:22 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. You guys did a fabulous job. Hope to see you all soon on our next meeting next month. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Gilbert. Aloha.
Aloha.
Oh, hui ho.